Elizabeth and I have been collaborating together for the last couple of years, and recently we've set up a new social enterprise, community interest company called Growing Real Food for Nutrition. This is what we're going to cover. The problem, as we see it, we're asking the question, what is nutrition? To understand that, we want to investigate what makes a plant grow, to understand food quality from the point of being able to measure what is called nutrient density, and hopefully put all that into the context of the future of food based on growing food for health, not wealth. Now, I've got a background as a deep ecologist, and that has what has informed me as a holistic environmental manager. And it's a philosophy that was first articulated in the 1970s as the United Nations were coming together to discuss the issues around what is called sustainable development. And an alternative view was given at the World Environmental Commission on the World Commission on Environmental Development in the 80s by a Norwegian deep green philosopher called Arne Næss, who articulated two major worldviews that exist in the world today and suggests that we all conform to one or the other. And he articulated that as understanding how the world works based on a shallow ecology understanding and a deep ecology understanding. And the shallow ecology is best described as the idea that humans stand outside of nature. We've come to the view that we are in control of nature. We have, from the pursuit of developing the modern scientific method, we've become very entrenched in a reductionist way of understanding the world. And it's often referred to as a mechanistic worldview. So the concept here is the worldview that the Western world conforms to is that the world is actually a machine. And all we need to do is understand how the moving parts work in order to be complete master of the world. But that has led to many, many problems. And so Arne Næss, the founder of Deep Ecology, he suggested there's another way of understanding how the world works, and that is based on the idea that actually we are a part of nature. And therefore, if we harm nature, we will harm ourselves. And what he was pointing at was the need to consider issues around spirituality and symbiosis and cooperation. These were all elements that he found to be missing in the current worldview. And so deep ecology is aimed at questioning our current worldview. And by practicing the art of asking ever deeper questions, we will arrive at a view that begins to develop our own ecological consciousness. And from that springboard, the individual will come to a realization that we are, in fact, a part of nature. And therefore, it becomes incumbent upon each individual that reaches that understanding to look after nature. So this is a horizontal approach where everybody is empowered through understanding their relationship with as an integral part of a natural world. So just to point out that associated with this current mechanistic worldview, which goes back to at least 1600s, but it could be argued it goes back thousands of years, this separation of body from mind, or spirit from the physical. So we've lived under now a very dominant worldview for the last 400 years that believes it understands and can control natural processes. And so the list of environmental impact given down in the bullet points there I suggest these are all tagged to how we think. So our philosophy, based on being separate from nature and the belief that we can control nature, has led to huge impact and the collapse of health on both the planet and people. So I see the issue of degenerative disease as an integral part of depleting the health of the planet. So climate change, loss of soil, health, these are all one and the same problem.
Yes, thank you, Matthew. So my background, I'm an international public health nutritionist. So obviously really interested in wanting to improve nutrition of populations and particularly reduce the prevalence of diet-related non-communicable diseases globally. So for me, this is a really important question. You know, what is nutrition and what is the current view? And it seems that it's actually become this very taken on a really reduced perspective, because mostly when we see any nutritional intervention, it's on the back or the side of packages, so back or side of package labeling. And it presents nutritional information in a very sort of structured format, following this particular order, as you see on the left-hand side of the slide. So energy, fat, saturates, carbohydrates, sugars, protein, and salt. Whereas on the right-hand side, perhaps we should be starting to consider looking at the nutrient cycling that's going on within mycorrhizal fungal networks in healthy soils. So totally different take on what is nutrition. When we look at the global level, there is the United Nations System Standing Committee on Nutrition, which has a vision of a world free from hunger and all forms of malnutrition. And it believes that this is attainable in the current generation. So the concept of nutrition sensitive agriculture has been around for a number of years. And for people who are working in nutrition and health and agriculture, food security, this is a concept that they will probably considered in terms of developing an appropriate intervention. So a plus point is that it's a food-based approach to agricultural development. However, when you actually start looking at it in more detail, it is in favour of supplementation, of fortification, and biofortification, which also includes genetic modification. So it's really like, look at the small print. And so nutrition sensitive agriculture in this way, it's viewed as an approach to overcoming malnutrition and micronutrient deficiencies. So we, growing real food for nutrition, we're arguing that perhaps an alternative way of looking at it would be for growing local, seasonal, nutrient-dense food from healthy soils.
So we're back to this picture again. This is a symbol that depicts the two worldviews. So on the left-hand side, we've got our current worldview or paradigm, with big ag standing at the beginning of the food chain and big pharma standing at the end of the food chain. And I think it's fair to say that food quality has never really been defined. And so with the lack of a definition, we've come to understand quality as yield, or in other words, money. So the whole current food system is based on generating wealth from food production. And that's really the number one focus. And when you begin to focus on making profit from extracting natural resources, then it starts to run into problems. And so the symbol here is the accountant injecting NPK fertilizer into the roots of the plant in the misunderstanding that we seem to somehow understand how a plant grows. But as we saw in the previous slide, this whole story is problematic because it creates all the environmental impact, which is reducing both health of planet and health of people. So that's the old paradigm. And on the right-hand side of this picture, we want to shift to a new paradigm where we're starting to see the potential vision of total health. And to do that, we want to investigate the nutritional quality of food and consider defining food or defining crop quality based on its nutritional density. So we want to understand what makes a plant grow, what makes a nutritious plant. And in order to do that, we're adopting an ecosystems approach, which states that the ecosystem approach is interested in studying the flow and transfer of energy and matter through a community of organisms. And if I articulate that, we're now reaching a point where people are talking about nutrient density, and if you get it right, it's possible to create a plant that's totally resistant to pests and diseases. And that becomes quite an appealing metric that we hope we can apply to quality food. And that potential to grow a plant with total resistance to pests and disease begins to demonstrate the possibility of total health. So if you can create just one plant that's resistant to pests and disease, it can only do that when it has access to the correct nutrition. And that access to the correct nutrition is dictated by the health of the soil. So how we nurture and look after the soil begins to dictate the quality of the food. And the whole system of nutrition begins with the primary producer. So in an ecological framework, the whole process begins by growing food, growing plants. And if we can produce a plant with total health, then it has the potential to move through food chains and promote total health in both animals and humans as it passes through those food chains. So that's the concept we're trying to work with, and we're introducing the ecosystems approach to help us study and understand that. So our current worldview has considered mostly just chemistry in what makes a plant grow, and and what we want to do is expand our understanding of what makes a plant grow to include the biology, particularly the microbiome around surrounding a plant. And it's an interesting little understanding. Now, there's a concept that in a teaspoon of healthy soil, there can be more individual organisms than there are people on this planet. So we're looking at 8 billion plus organisms living in a teaspoon of soil with an immense diversity that are cooperating. And I think these are key words. They're cooperating with each other and with the plant. And the plant is feeding the microbes with exudates, and the microbes in return are helping to feed the plant. So biology is going to be important, and physics is important as well. So this slide is an example of the biology and how it works with the plant, and new understandings are coming. Are coming to the science, and this one is about the idea that 90% of all chemical elements must first be consumed by a living organism, and so what that means is that the plant requires iron and selenium and phosphorus and potassium and a whole host of mineral elements, and the exudates that's being pushed out by the plant through the roots are potentially communicating directly with certain species of microbes, asking them to collect these chemical elements. And so bacteria and fungi are finding these elements in the soil and actually eating them. And in that process of eating them, are making them biologically alive. So they now have an additional quality, if you like, a living nutrient, which is then taken up through the root tip. The microbe plus the chemical element that it's eaten is taken up through the root tip. And then there's a process of extraction within the root, where the chemical element is extracted and the single-celled organism comes back out of the root via the root hairs. It's a fascinating story of the importance of having microbes surrounding the plant. Just to touch on the energy question, this is a whole area now that's really in its infancy, but is starting to be talked about, and it's the role of energy as it flows through ecosystems. And it's not just energy from the sun, it's energy from chemical elements themselves. So in the air, the water, the soil, in all those chemical elements, each atom contains a high amount of energy. And that is also being taken in by the plant. And I've got this slide here, not that I can particularly talk about the physics, but I've always been taken with this quote by Nikola Tesla. He was working around energy up until he died in the mid 1900s, I think. He particularly understood energy and had actually created a free energy device, and many other inventions were credited to this person, to Nikola Tesla. And it's just the quote that, you know, if we begin to look at energy in a serious way, that we have the potential to learn in a decade more than we've learned in the previous few centuries, by understanding energy. So that I wanted to include that. I personally don't know an awful lot about it, but I believe that this has an essential element to the story of understanding nutrition, what makes a plant grow. And so I've included that. So it's a combination now of chemistry, biology, and physics.
How do we measure food quality based on nutrient density? And well, the device that you can use is this little in the figure at the top on the left. That is a handheld Brix refractometer, and essentially you get your carrot, you squish it with some pliers or garlic press or something, put 2 to 3 drops on the little blue prism, flip down the lid, and then you look through the eyepiece at the end. And what you will see is something, it could be one or the other, or combination of these 2 images below and in the interpreting Brix. So the Brix value, that's BRIX value, it's a numerical value that actually measures the total dissolved solids within that carrot, or that sample of a crop that you're wanting to test to see how well it's been grown. And the higher the Brix value, the more compounds you have in the plant. So if we look at trying to figure out what's going on in that diagram to the left, where you've got more blue and a little bit of white. So that's showing that that is actually a low Brix value. So low nutrient density, it's got few dissolved solids in it. You might notice that the line demarcating the blue from the white is actually very clear, it's very sharp. And that's a really important factor, because what that is meaning is that there are not many dissolved solids in that carrot, if it was a carrot, and that is actually reflected in the diagram on the right, which is explaining the process of photosynthesis. So a lower Brix and a clearer line indicates that you have got simple sugars as total dissolved solids in that carrot. What you really should be aiming for is something on the right hand side. So you've got a higher Brix. The blue is in a sort of elevated position of what you're looking at, and the actual line is a bit fuzzy. So this is something that is really showing that the photosynthesis process is much more efficient, and what you're producing is all these different sort of compounds, elements on the right hand side of the diagram. So you see that we're now moved, we've got complex sugars, we've got carbohydrates, proteins, fats, hormones, vitamins, these aromatic compounds like flavonoids that give you the marvelous taste. And there's a correlation between high nutrient density and high taste. There's also the phytonutrients, protective compounds, which, as Matthew was saying, was sort of that the high bricks actually leads to total resistance to pest diseases. And you also get root exudates, which is another way of showing that carbon is being sequestered into the soil. So the diagram on the left is more indicative of say the carrot produced from industrial agriculture, where the soil could be potentially dead, devoid of soil biology. The bricks on the right is indicative of a carrot that could be produced from a more regenerative farming practice, where the soil is rich in soil biology. And that symbiotic relationship enables nutrient, water, and carbon cycling to take place within the soil. But a question that was posed, and I think sort of often people consider, is that, well, a carrot's just a carrot, isn't it? You know, but is a carrot, or is there variation? And we're linked with the Bionutrient Food Association in America that implemented their Real Food Campaign, USA, to actually look at the nutrient variation, specifically the mineral variation in different crops. Now in 2018, they started looking at two crops, that was spinach and carrots. And we're just highlighting some, some key findings here. And for time, I just want to focus on what's going on with the carrot to keep this sort of carrot theme going. So as you can see on the right-hand side, you have got antioxidants. And what it's showing is that over 500 samples of carrots were sent in to the Real Food Campaign laboratory and analysed for antioxidant content. Now you see that most of the samples are clustering down at the bottom end, that's the left-hand end of the scale, but there are some in this upper level on the right-hand side. And what the findings are showing there is that if you ate one of those carrots on the right-hand side, which is high in antioxidants, that would be the equivalent to eating 90 carrots at the bottom end. So that is like quite amazing. So similarly, in terms of polyphenol levels, and that's at the bottom on the right-hand side, this difference between eating one of the carrots that is high in polyphenol levels is equivalent to eating 200 carrots with very little polyphenol content. So that, so next slide, please, Matthew. And if we similarly look at, we've got potassium and calcium content of the carrots on the right-hand side. So you can see, again, they analysed over 500 samples. The majority of the samples were clustering down at that bottom end in terms of levels of potassium and calcium. And again, if you at one of the top, the higher levels, you would be eating the equivalent of 15 carrots worth of potassium, and similarly 6 carrots to 1 in the calcium content. So I think they well and truly answered this question that a carrot is not a carrot. They vary considerably by mineral content. Yeah, so spurred on by these results, the Real Food Campaign decided to extend the number of food crops they were looking at, and they increased this to 6. That was grapes, carrots, kale, cherry tomatoes, lettuce, and spinach. They asked for samples of these food crops and the soil in which the crops were grown in to be sent to their laboratory. This is by grower partners all over the USA who sent the samples for detailed analysis. And the grower partners also provided some metadata such as varieties of the crops they were growing, and also growing practices and say the elevation they were at, the location. And these are the key findings from 2019 of 3,000 samples. So we're particularly interested in the antioxidant and polyphenol levels and how they relate to the growing practices. So you can see that those 6 crops grown hydroponically and in greenhouses, their antioxidant and polyphenol levels were below the median. Similarly, biodynamically certified crops were also below the median. Organically certified produce was around the median. That's American organically certified, I should add. And organic but not certified was above the median. So here I'm feeling that, you know, say permaculture, agroecology, farmers and growers can start to become interested. And the highest levels of antioxidants and polyphenols were from crops grown using regenerative farming practices, which increased soil biology, such as cover cropping and no-till, and those were well above the median. So these results are from ongoing research, and it's showing that it's the how you grow your crops is a determining factor of antioxidants and polyphenol levels, which are crucial for human health.
This is the bionutrient meter now that is responsible for producing those and the findings that Elizabeth is being used. Now, this is ongoing research, and the findings are preliminary findings at the end of each year. So they are not to be taken as an end result, but they are there to be taken as generating interest around this whole subject. And that means it throws up, it begins to throw up questions. So we're already seeing from the variation in nutrient levels that's it. And another question that is being generated is around the labeling system. So we currently use the labels of organic certification. There's talk of creating another label for regenerative, and all the while these labels are describing the systems, not the actual quality of the food. And I would argue that these labels are required only when we are disconnected from our food. So if we don't meet the grower face to face, then we are in effect disconnected from our food. That food can be packaged, put onto a lorry, sent halfway around the world and appear in a shop somewhere completely removed from where it was grown. And so under that paradigm, you do need a label. But as we're trying to argue, this is part of our problem. So we would like to think about shifting away from the labels to just be able to measure the quality of the food easily, would be a way to progress and a way to evolve into this new paradigm. So we are questioning that need for labeling and suggesting that being able to measure the quality of the food would be a far better way of determining crop quality and bringing around an improved relationship with nature as we understand what it requires to grow better food. And so building out the vision of the future, apparently there's 570 million farms worldwide, and 90% are run by an individual or family. And together they're producing 80% of the world's food. Now, when I think about that, I think the current paradigm is wanting us to shift towards large-scale agriculture with the use of technology. And what that is doing is it's enslaving, I think, the small individually run family farm to enter into the global food supply chain. And we know that the global food supply chain, it really is only benefiting a very few people. It's not benefiting the whole, and it's certainly not benefiting our relationship with nature. And so trying to move towards the future, if we could understand what crop quality is, if we can do that based on an understanding of nutrient density, if we can understand how nutrient density relates to our relationship with nature, then it becomes a relationship that is symbiotic, where when we look after nature, i.e., we're looking after the soil, we're looking after the health of the planet to create nutritious food, then the direct result of that is food that's packed full of nutrients, but also packed full of the processes of nature that creates that plant. And that generates a picture of total health from one plant. And if you multiply that by the number of plants being grown, then you start to see a vision, a shifting vision of food being grown for health, not wealth. And there are some examples that they're building. We've got zero budget natural farming in India, and we're currently working with the group in Andhra Pradesh, and this is government backed, but they have 6 million small subsistence farmers. And due to the high rates of suicide, they are looking to find alternative solutions. And zero budget natural farming is about teaching the small farmer, empowering them to grow better food without the use of inputs. And so they are beginning to achieve this, and they have 500,000 farmers signed up, with another 5.5 million farmers to target. In Africa, there's the participatory guarantee system, which is about self-certification. It's about food citizens meeting the people that grow their food and building trust around the food that they grow, and building community around the food production system. And then there's the La Via Campesina movement, which began in South America, I know is worldwide now, but it's a movement to support that small subsistence grower and to and allow them to have sovereignty over their food. So that's where we'd like to see the development of understanding what nutrient density is, being able to easily measure it, and encouraging people to move towards that small scale local food supply to make the current paradigm of the global food supply obsolete.
So yeah, so it's essential that we decouple from the global food supply chain and reliance on big pharma. So that's the big ag, big food, big pharmaceutical, big pharma that I'm talking about. This that are keeping individuals, their families, and society sick. And we need to move from that business as usual paradigm. So ideally, we should have nutrient dense food that's grown for localized food systems based on agricultural biodiversity rich agroecology that's developed within the framework of food sovereignty. And just to flag what food sovereignty is, it's a food system in which the people who produce, distribute, and consume food also control the mechanisms and policies of food production and distribution. So what we're also advocating for is a shift from food quantity based on yield as a measure of productivity to food quality based on nutrient density. This needs to then be coupled with a shift from food security to nutrition security, so that everyone is eating nutritious food. And also a shift to viewing food as medicine. so that keeping us healthy and preventing or reversing poor health is possible by eating nutrient-dense food. And we should consider this as a basic right. So it's a right to nutritious food. Next one, Matthew. So by shifting to considering nutrition from an expanded worldview, this enables nature-friendly farming, where humans are stewards of nature, thereby ensuring that total health is transferred along food supply chains from plants to animals and humans and to the environment and the planet. Next slide. So if you would like to help change the paradigm and join our journey, that's Growing Real Food for Nutrition's journey, please have a look at our website, sign up to Griffin's mailing list. You can also follow us on Twitter, and the Twitter handle is there. And please get in touch with us if you're interested in possible collaborative projects or looking for funding. Make a donation to support our work if you feel that would be marvelous. And also, if you're currently doing any work on like measuring food quality, looking at ways of growing nutrient-dense food, please get in contact and share your work so that you too can be out there helping to shift the paradigm.